He said, I'm not. Say again?
Recording in progress.
Oh, thank you. That's someone said her name, so I always forget her name. And she basically moved to the town, and she didn't have a job, 1950s, 60s homemaker. She said, I'm going to clean this up. And people said, one woman can't do this, and she did it. It's a really empowering story. You can spend a whole hour. I'll show you the reference to find it. Okay, so why do these slideshows? Some of you suffered from my slideshow last year where I talked about paddling from my home in Maynard, Massachusetts to the ocean, 62 miles in 2 days, to trace a path of water takes. And it's for a lot of reasons, right? It's a little inspiring. It's the network and making friends and paddle partners. In a little bit, we were talking about this today, to record for my children. I got 2 kids. I adopted kids late in life. I got a wife. What's this thing called here? What this guy's doing? You want to know? Flagpole sitting. Flagpole sitting. So I had a memory recently, and I said to my aunt, who's kind of the matriarch of the family, the last living of my mother's generation, I said, hey, Grandpa was a flagpole sitter. She goes, no, he wasn't. She's the biggest. And I go, yeah, I can remember being 15 years old and him telling me that one day, and I was too dumb of a kid to unpack that and learn any more. A little bit of history. My grandpa used to sit on top of a flagpole for days on end, but never told anybody, right? Until years later, and he had his first grandson, and finally tell him. So I'm trying to show my kids do exciting, hard things. So a little bit of past exploits in the canoe. I did the Ruta Maya, which is a 180-mile canoe trip. I like a lot of long flat piles, a little bit of white water. I'm not a very good polar, but I'm trying to be better. Try to keep up with Matt whenever I can. What I'm really trying to do is to paddle every river in Massachusetts source to sea, and I consider source where I can step across it. So I often end up bushwhacking a couple miles. I claim, after 21 years in the military, I claim with a buddy of mine to have the longest combat canoe patrol in American history at 220 miles, and no one's corrected us yet, so we're going. So why do these adventures? We were talking earlier amongst the crowd, like, I want to go to the subarctic for a month at a time. I'm in the prime of my earning potential, trying to raise 2 kids, pay a mortgage, keep my wife from putting the prenup on the fridge door, and so there's just not 3 weeks a year to do this. So what I try to do every year, I try to pack as much excitement as I can into a couple 48-hour trips. No one walks by me and says, that's an endurance athlete. So that's what I kind of do. This is a picture in our neighborhood here, not of me leaving the front yard with my canoe to canoe to the ocean when I did last year. I now, on Fridays, before I pick up my kids from school, carry that darn prospector 600 meters down to the river, pull up the river a mile, pull back, and then portage 600 meters back to my house. And that's just my Friday, 3 to 4:15. That's what I do. This, by the way, is the trip. This is where I started. That's where I ended up in one day. Talk about that. Training, not a lot about training. I ride my bike to work 40 miles. You think I'd be skinnier. But basically, I try to keep up with my beautiful daughters and wonderful wife. And if you think I'm intense, think about the 93-pound woman who keeps me alive. So I do CrossFit, I do powerlifting, I jog, and I do a lot of stuff. One of the things that really fascinates me and it keeps me doing this, rivers are our original highways. Who's ever bushwhacked? Yeah, right? If you can think about hitting a continent, whether you were the first peoples to do it, the second, third, or fourth wave, this continent particularly was overwhelming. But a river is a linear geographical feature that you can put your hand next to and follow, and then later come back on. Or you can build something that floats and go upstream, downstream, bushwhacking between. That's just a really fascinating thing. The Canadians are really good about celebrating that heritage, less so here in America, and we're trying to change that. So I really think about how rivers move goods and transportation, how they provided energy, how they provided storage, and from an exploring point of view, they're self-sustaining. You have your water where you go. You can fish and hunt game because it all comes to the river and you can explore continents. I just love it. Anyway, so the Nashua River, this is the woman on the top right. I cannot remember her name. I'm so sorry. I might say the work of 1,000. You Google that. There's a great 12-minute YouTube video that talks about how she did this. A little background on the river. It's 37.5 miles long. It drains an area of 538 square miles. That's something I've really started paying attention to in rivers because that will tell you how that river responds to rain and do a project around bridge flooding. It has 4 tributaries. What I would tell you, if you really hate somebody, get them to go canoe the Nissitissit and the Squanicook with you, because those are absolutely brutal rivers. Stunningly beautiful cold water trout streams, some of the best in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I did the Squanicook in 18 miles. I stopped counting on my 100th portage. And that's not an exaggeration. We did the Nissitissit. It took us 8 hours to go 8 miles. That is not our normal pace. We might have been 6 hours. Formerly one of the worst 10. I said that already. This is the guidebook for it. Has anyone seen this guidebook? Yeah, I normally, is anyone on the call associated with writing this guidebook? Okay. Whoever wrote this guidebook, I don't know. Anyone use the AMC guidebook? AMC guidebook's really good. It describes the river, and I like how direct they are. They'll say things like, do not paddle this section of river. It goes through a channelized section of downtown and there's a dam. To do so would be suicide. You go, okay, I'm not going to do that. These folks say, there's a really dangerous cross country that should be avoided. And you get there, and it's like when the toddler drains the bathtub. Like, I don't understand this. You go, well, maybe different water conditions. So I went back and saw it in different water conditions. I don't know. I think it was mainly written by, maybe the river's changed a lot. I don't know. So anyways, that's the trip. Nice talking to you. All right, so let's talk about the actual trip. July 24th, 2024 of this year. I spent a lot of time, like a lot of you, looking at weather and light data. Perfect day, 15 and a half hours of sunshine, temperatures high to mid 70s. Bit of a wind. The hard thing was the water was a little low. If anyone's got better eyes than me, I think it was 2.34 feet. I would have liked another half foot of water. We talked about what impact it had at the beginning of the trip. The gear I took a Winona Advantage, which is a 16 and a half foot boat that is an awesome solo boat. It's like a detuned racing boat made for mostly flat water and downriver. They stopped making it for a long time, and Winona just started making it again. That's almost all of the gear I took without a picture of the bicycle, and we'll talk about the bicycle. I think I'm a big fan of packing into a small barrel I got here. There's one problem with the barrel. With this trip, I only had 2 things. I had my barrel and my giant water bag, because I had a lot of water. It made it really hard to turn my boat when 90% of your weight's in the barrel. There is an advantage to having some smaller bags. If you're portaging a lot, which you will see that what I do later, I'm glad I had basically one item taken out of the boat. I call it the tale of 2 paddles. This is one of the trips that I start with this big, robust wooden blade paddle that has, it's called a double bend. It's really good for your wrist. But then I also use a fairly lightweight carbon paddle, not as light as some, which makes a big difference. And I switch back and forth between the paddles depending on how much I'm taking brush with it. One of the keys of this trip, even though there was really nowhere, there weren't a lot of places that I was nervous about. The trip I did last year to the ocean, the trip I'm going to do next year, I'm really nervous about. But I was worried about being benighted, because there's long stretches where you don't come near a road and you don't have self-service. So I said, well, if you have an injury, make sure you camp it over. That's why it's huge. And I'm just so general scheme of maneuver. What I did, I got some maps. I drove to Lancaster at about 4 in the morning, dropped off my canoe at what they call the meeting of the waters, when the North Nashua comes into Leominster, meets the Still River out of the Watershed Reservoir. Dropped my canoe gear off. I drove to Nashua, New Hampshire, and then I rode my bicycle 40-ish miles back. And then I canoed, got back to my truck, and then I was going to go back to my bicycle. So what was really cool about it was a self-supported trip. I really like doing that. That's my Randonnée bicycle. I do a whole slideshow about Randonnée bicycles. Why those are awesome. Special design bicycle that's really good for slow guys that like short distances. It was just that. It was good. And yeah, so I did buy. So here we go. Let's get into it. So I dropped my truck off at my canoe off at 4 o'clock in the morning. Did anyone been to this put-in just upstream of the meeting of the waters? It's surrounded by an old cemetery. Actual pictures, totally not creepy. Be alone at 4 a.m. dropping your canoe off. The put-in is actually like 100 meters down this dirt road. And this picture of this truck is actually from 2 weeks ago when my buddy Rick, many of you guys know Rick, and I did a paddle. There is like a 20-foot wide, 20-foot long mud puddle that gets to be a foot deep. I know this because I put in here many times in the summer. Fun antidote. 2 weeks ago, we paddled this. I drove my truck across it. My truck broke through the ice to 1.5 foot of mud. Gotta love a Tacoma, locking differentials. I was able to get my truck out of it. Carefully, ice on that. So I dropped the gear off. You'll see this on a lot of my slide decks. I take pictures on my watch to mark the time. At this point in the day, I was thinking, you should have started this early. Should have been up for 3 a.m. Start already getting nervous about the day. So I drove to Nashua, New Hampshire. There's a big fancy condo that we purposed to build. We'll see pictures of that later. And this is when I started my bicycle. And I'll be honest, I was getting nervous now. It's like, I think I'm already behind the gun. I wish I had started earlier. This is going to be a day. So I started the bike ride, just absolutely stunning. I found myself commuting at the normal time I ride my bike to work on the same bicycle at exactly the same time. I'm like, life was great. The bike ride south from Nashua to Lancaster is stunning. Most of it was on a bike path. What a great day this is. As I go, I got to see some lovely pictures, take pictures of some of my favorite things, bridges, trains, and old mill buildings. I even got to spot a little set of riffles in one of the portages at the Gravy Research Institute. Not Ice House Dam, another dam. This is a fascinating thing to actually have a working dam that's actually making electricity there. I didn't think about radio research. I really online to see a picture of all those old clock radios, this damn radio guy. The radio research on phone. Shoot me an email. I want to meet you. So, like, kind of transportation there. I'm riding on a bike path on a rural road next to an active train line. I just thought. So here's different maps. So we might yeah. Good. So just point something out. I spent a lot of time as part of my job doing Google Maps and Apple Maps and Waze. It's hard to see this image, but if you look at here, this is the actual the water. North Nashua coming north, and then over here is coming out from the Nashua River. Well, something I've learned recently professionally, Waze likes to keep crowdsourcing humans in the loop. They want to know what the room thinks, and that must be the right thing, which is kind of cool. Go on Wikipedia right now and say a canoe is a square-shaped object. Someone will correct that in 20 minutes, right? They're probably a jerk saying that. They'll correct it. Google likes to automate everything. So if one person says it's a square-shaped object, that can get into the matrix of how it goes. Google Maps calls all three of these the Nashua River. Only that. So, all right. So the meeting of the waters. That's the section the guidebook says is really dangerous. It's not. I start paddling, and that's the first bridge I went under. I tend to take a picture of every bridge, and I immediately notice this water is really low. Like I am scraping my paddle on every stroke, and I didn't bring a pole with me. And this is not the kind of canoe that you stand up and pole it. And I'm thinking, okay, you got like 4 bridge crossings in the next 10 miles. You can bail if it's too slow. If you're dragging the boat through shallows, you can just bail out of this. Even though I checked the river gauge and I continually paddle another section of the river at the same water level, but I was already nervous. What I also noticed, this is the meeting of the waters, is that you look at that river and you go, that looks really paddleable. All but 2 canoe widths is 6 inches deep. So all the current was getting channelized in one section, and it was probably like a 2.5 to 4 mile an hour current there. I was loaded stern heavy, so my boat kept getting spun around on me. I was very frustrated. So right away, I'm taking the boat apart and retrimming my gear. I'm frustrated, and I'm looking at all this wood in the river and thinking, I've had a couple of big storms in 2 years, and I haven't paddled this section of the river. This might be bad. Sure enough, it was bad. This is where I got my trim. My boat trim. So this is going to start a section of every time you see a picture like this, I want you to notice and think, where does that river go? Anyone see where the river goes? It's a lot of wood. So on this trip, another time, this is like the first one, I stopped counting, I think, at 30 when I had to get out of my boat and drag it across the log. And I stopped at 30 because I went to state school. I'm just not that smart. I couldn't keep track. So there was a 5-mile section between the meeting of the meeting of the waters in Harvard or Bolton Flats, what we call, that was just absolutely brutal. It was beautiful. There's a picture of it right now. I have to go under 117. Yeah, pretty nice day. Notice how much the light is, by the way. The light was a really funny day. It was a really flat light, not great photographs. It was warm, so no complaints there. But this is what the river looked like. 5 miles. This is what I had to do. So every time I'm taking a picture now for the next 20 slides, it means I had to get out of the boat and physically drag it. And on more than 2 occasions, I was getting out on things higher than this, dragging the boat over, sliding it down, and then kind of, I call it cowboying, right? Like, how do I get it? You can't get the boat because there's a fast current that takes the boat away from you. So you're kind of jumping off and trying to straddle this long, narrow canoe and shimmy down and go. Again, I don't look like a gymnast. I was the base of the pyramid in college, not the top. So as you can see, just more and more. This was it. So for 5 miles, I had nothing but every sight line, by the way. I would drag my boat across something, and I could see the next strainer and sweeper. It was just enough current to be scary. Oh yeah, this is really cool. Because the water is so low, I can see undercurrent. And I saw multiple muskrat holes. I could see vertical muskrats where they like to go in under the water. I thought that's really interesting. And just brutal, just absolutely brutal. This one I remember being so excited. I looked at this. This is the same picture, and then I went, oh, I got down there and it was just the narrowest little gap to get through. It's like, what a godsend. So all through this section, I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to work. There's no way you're doing this 40-ish mile trip today. You're just not going to happen. I was soaking wet. I swam multiple times. Like this one, I remember I was saying, pictures are hard to show depth, right? I'm not a GoPro video guy. I was like 6 feet above the water when I took this, thinking, you're going to fall and break your leg, right? And you're just going to float here. And so one of the things I kept in mind, and I was like actively thinking in this section, to my right, down river right east, was flat farmland on the way to 110 in Harvard. But it can also be really swampy. To the west is Fort Devens, where they say, do not enter, we'll shoot you. I was in the Army for 21 years. I know the guys that will shoot. So I'm like, I'm going to walk that way, because if I get hurt, all those guys also know first aid, and see what happens. Luckily, nothing happened. But it was just absolutely miserable. Now, bear in mind, when I say miserable, I was having a really good time. I like this. I'm singing Neil Young songs. No one can hear me first. But the whole time I'm thinking, there is no way I'm finishing this trip. This is a great picture. Anyone who knows me, I drink my coffee. See how everything's at the front of the boat? And that's because the bow of the boat is probably about 4 feet higher than the stern of the section. So it was just a very vertically challenging jungle gym day. You can kind of see there how shallow the water was. Peak of summer, vegetation's overgrown. It was just gnarly. It was just full stop gnarly. Little thing too, if anyone paddles a solo boat or sits in the bow of a boat, these little foam pads, like they cut up my little daughter's pool noodles to do that. It's really life changing. She likes to pull it. I saw and what I want you to take away from this is every one of these pictures was a portage around the river, through the river, and was a significantly emotional event. And the chain here, I know this gets repetitive, and it was. I would climb over something, portage around something, throwing the barrel. Oh, the advantage of the barrel is I would just throw it. I would just absolutely just chuck it as far as I could. It floats, and I was like, I'll get you 40 feet and catch you and throw you back in. Because a lot of times I couldn't. You're standing 4, 5, 6 feet above the water, and you don't want to drop it into your boat and break the boat. You're telling me something. Will you hear me better here? Here and project toward. Okay. I've never been told to be louder, but I'll try. Thank you. This was one of the portages around the river. Absolutely. So a quick side. I knew this section. All these pictures are right here in this section right here. I knew this was going to be bad because 3 or 4 years ago I done it with my family because I'm a bad dad and I take 4-year-old girls. Anyway, to Whitewater, and I knew back then there was like 6 or 8 portages, and I said I want to see it. So my buddy Craig and I, who might be on the line, we set out to do this. And being dads, it was summertime. We said we'll do it after we put our kids to bed. The kids kept going later and later to bed, and I said that's all right. We have headlamps. We paddle a lot at night. We paddle on the Sudbury, the Concord, big wide open river. I'd never paddled a river this tight at night. Which who says nighttime canoeing? You mean like a loop around the cottage pond, right? So we went down there to this put-in, the one we were talking about. We unloaded our gear, and I said, we got to get on the bikes. We dropped our gear at the put-in, drove to the takeout, and I said, we got to hurry, buddy. We got to ride back to the put-in and do this. And this train came and just sat there for 20 minutes. And it's like, you can't see the end of it. There's no human being. And like, we're looking at it like, scamper under there before it starts moving. And I was like, yeah, I don't know I can do that with a bicycle. And we were just like, well, I guess we'll wait. And we sat there for 20 minutes. And by the time we hit the water that night, it was dark within 20 minutes. I paddled at night. I spent half my 30s and 20s bushwhacking the jungles at nighttime. But what I didn't anticipate was how hard it is to paddle a river with a 3 to 5 mile current that has a portage every 200 feet in the night. And I've done kind of edge case that solo. We were in a tandem, and in the stern, the back, every time your partner takes a paddle stroke, your headlamp, you get the flash of light reflecting off the paddle. I was blind, and he couldn't see very far. I brought 2 headlamps. His immediately died. I said, grab your second headlamp. He said, I didn't bring 2. I brought 1. I'm like, oh, man. So now we're each at one. I'm like, we're 1 headlamp breaking away from this being a total disaster. So we went like maybe 3/4 of a mile in an hour because we're, portaging in the dark, and it took us 2 hours to get back. There's not a lot of times in life I've turned back in a canoe. I was glad I did it that time. Then later, when I came back and did that 5-mile section, we would have been benighted, full stop. We would have been out there all night, slapping mosquitoes, waiting for the sun to come up. So very interesting experience. Craig, if you're on the line there, thanks for still talking to me, buddy. There's also 2 other tributaries that you talked about, Squanicook and Nissitissit. There's 25 miles of it. That's one picture of the Squanicook, which was actually harder than the Harvard section. It was non-stop that. And that's the story I tell them. And the paddlers will get this. The thing about the Squanicook, there's a lot of section where the bank's so steep, you can't get out of the river. You're crawling through the stuff that just wants to cut you. And this isn't a picture of it, but we hit a section like this, and there was a very mature oak tree, 4 or 5 feet in diameter, 1.5 foot, I want to say, ish off the water. And we actually couldn't get up on it. We stood on the boat, we just physically couldn't get on it. Might have been higher. But the boat wouldn't go under it. And we were literally, we can't go forward. This bank was too steep, too muddy, too slippery. Like, well, we could go upstream like 400 meters and get out there and then push back through all this thick stuff. And I was like, man, I've had enough of this. And I know Craig's he was like a college runner in college student. I was like, come on, buddy, get out of the boat. So we get out of the boat, we're floating to Sunday Bay. Let's swamp the boat. He's like, well, we're going to swamp the boat and go under the tree. And so we swamped our boat, got it on the tree, tied it off, took our life jackets off, which is not a very good feeling to do. We did it one at a time, came out the other side, and then started bailing the boat out because we didn't have anything to prop it up. So we get over the tree and honor Mary. So if you want to really, like, if you're thinking, like, I don't know this guy really well, but let's go canoeing in Alaska for a month, but I only have a day to see if we're going to get along well, go take him on Squanicook. That's the way we do it. I'll do it again in a minute, by the way. This is going underneath the Fort Devens Railroad Bridge. And again, I take a lot of pictures of bridges. 2 things here. They were working on the bridge. I remember looking at these guys, and they're just looking at me like, who's this wing guy? You have no idea what they're doing. The other thing, anyone know about the ordering of streams? They call streams first order, second order, third order. It's how you describe how big a river is. It's something engineers and river scientists use. I was thinking about that on this trip because I'd read about this at work, part of the project I'm trying to do. And I was like, there's this little beaver here blowing in. It's hard to see in this video. Like, there's a lot of water coming over that beaver, even though we were in a drought. And I kind of peeked over it, and I was like, who knows what's behind that? And I made a mental note. I'm going to go back and explore that in the middle of Fort Devens. Luckily, I've retired next year. So this is where I finally got good. We crossed underneath, I'm about 2 miles south of Route 2 now. And now I have like 3 feet of water, and I can see like 200 meters at a time without a blowdown, and life was good. So I swapped to my carbon paddle, and I said to myself, okay, I can do this now. I can paddle in the dark. I might actually push this trip today. When I look back at my GPS, and I'm not one to be a data guy, I normally paddle that boat on open water. My tripping speed is like 5 miles per hour. My planning speed, I use 4. Bathroom breaks, food, nap checks. It took me, I think, 2 hours to go 5 miles, and I was working hard. So I got back on track, start paddling. This is going under Route 2, saw some interesting scaffolding on Route 2. As you figured out, I work in transportation, some other people this really are used to. We don't think about bridges and how they carry water. So now I'm going through the upper Devon section. I looked over. There's a story behind this. Someone just told me there used to be some cabin here. This is one of many structures you'll see today that I just kind of eerily looked at. And I said, if I see a red balloon floating, I'm out of here. This is another bridge. That's a very good takeout at the Arthur Ashe takeout, I think it is, something Ash. That's another fine takeout. So Ice House Dam. This is my first portage. This is the what Grady Engineering is. I took a little picture there. This was a good portage because I had done everything downstream of this, and I knew I'd really survive this at this point. What I tried to do, and I think it got lost when we converted to PDF, is actually show you the distances of the portage. I don't know if someone see that. Does it say 900 feet? It was about less than a quarter mile for you to get around that damn path on the TA train. Who knows what this is? Yeah, like a survey marker, a control point, a benchmark. It always amazes me how many of these I see in the floodplain. You think they'd put them high and dry so they never get undermined. And that was an interesting one. I meant to go back and look that up in the state survey to see that. Just downstream of that, you go under a rail bridge, probably the third picture of railroads today. There was an active train moving across it. This section, the guidebook says to use extreme caution, that it's really dangerous. Okay. I'm always cautious individual. But I was like, all right. Interesting picture. You can see what I do with my boat. I tape all my snacks right there. So I get my bag out. I ate a lot of snacks that day when I don't like this. I don't stop much. Feeding myself. This is one of 3 or 4 power transmission lines on the right picture across the river that I used to index myself and know where I am. And you just saw a bunch of beautiful stuff now. Just going through this. This is interesting. This is north of Route 2. This is an aluminum canoe. I've paddled by this boat maybe on 5 or 6 different trips. And I've actually seen it sunk below the water with rainwater, but somehow it's always there. It's on this like little piece of like hardware store 3/8 nylon rope that the sun is just slowly eating away. And I don't know if it just evaporates itself out and starts floating again, or if someone actually paddles it. Well, it's also on an embankment. I think it's down there. It's not a race. Again, another one. No red balloons. Keep going. This is a private school's boathouse, River Right. When my buddy and I finished the Squanicook, we had to do 2 or 3 miles on this down to Pitches Bridge. And there was this, I think it's a prep school or private college. There were crew teams who were out rowing, crews of 6. And there was the boys team and the women's team. And really interesting, I'm a daughter dad. The boys team just wanted to race us. I'm like, boys, you know, we're in this prospector canoe. We looked like we just came back from Vietnam. We were cutting and bleeding. We didn't want to race. And the women's team, all they wanted to do was talk to us about the trip. They had never really thought about the boat as transportation going from A to B. And I just thought, what an interesting difference between them. Hear that. So at some point, the boys wanted to race. So we turned it on a little bit. Of course, they beat us. They were like in a 6-man crew boat. But they stopped paying attention and they put themselves into a snag. They've never seen a 6-person crew boat hit a blowdown in the river. It's really hard to unmess that thing up. So we left them. So now the river is vastly different. You know, it's flat, it's open, it's probably like a 2-mile-an-hour current. Now I'm thinking about what my line is. How do I go corner to corner? How do I make the most of the current? Paul, I don't know if you're on the call today. So when I do these like mega trips, I try not to make my wife worry. And I can always tell where my marriage is because there's one of 2 things on the refrigerator door. It's either the prenup or the life insurance policy with certain sections highlighted. And my wife is quite the adventurous outdoors woman. That's why I met her. I know her. But what I did too is do a text stream with 3 or 4 people and say, hey, I might text you a certain increments just to let you know where I am. And this guy in particular said, hey, if I get into trouble, can I give you a call and you'll come get me in the middle of the trip? And Paul said yes. And Paul's the guy to do it. You know, career Air Force guy, outdoorsman all around. And I never asked him to. I kind of thought he just showed up. He guessed my pace and he was there waiting. And that was really nice. And he did it a couple more times throughout the trip. We had a very clear rule. As I kept trying to grab the boat on the portages and they could touch the boat. It's just me, but have a nice chat, make the companionship. Funny story on this, Veterans Day last year, I did an 18-mile section of this river in preparation for this to scout it out. And I was paddling under Fitch's Bridge, which is a beautiful pedestrian bridge, and I was kind of zoned out. Sometimes just getting that rhythm. And that's what I love about canoeing. It's in the time I'm out and ready to fly. And I felt something across my face, and it was fishing line. And I looked, and I had gloves on. It was Veterans Day, and it was kind of cold last year. This rubber fishing was. And I started trying to clear the line. And at the end of the boat, I saw come up a rather large hook. I couldn't find a picture of it. And all I could think about is if this fish hook came up and snagged me in the wrong place, and I couldn't get out of the glove of the jacket, I was like, that will drown you, right? In the current, you go down, and I was very lucky I was able to flip it off at the last second. I still have that fishing hook. So even on a benign section of river like that, it's still clear. I appreciated this because I don't have a lot of pictures of myself. I don't like pictures of myself. But he took a picture and kind of just to show what the boat looks like. It's a fascinating boat. It's really fast. Has a lot of tumble on your hips, a sliding seat. And by then you can see I kind of figured out to move that barrel forward. You can also see I eat most of my snacks. So off we go. This is north of 117. There's a really large swamp structure. You can kind of see that in the picture here. The interesting thing that day, because of where it was in summer, we're in a dry year, it was basically all covered over with pond scum. Right, so I actually had a moment or 2 that I had to stand up in that boat, which is not meant for standing up in, and try to figure out which way to go. And the wind really picked up. This is where I pulled out in Groton to go across their dam, which does produce electricity. And so, you know, on this trip, I had to make a decision. This boat I don't have a yoke for, so I often just carry it on my shoulder. But I had so much portaging to do this, I bought a little kayak dolly. I'm going to try a trip around the Marathon Monday this year, canoeing between Concord, New Hampshire, and Concord, Massachusetts. because my wife said, can anyone even do that? And I said, don't challenge my masculinity, hold my beer. And so what I really got to figure out with that, that's got a 3-mile portage through Lowell. I got to figure out if I do it solo, because I probably can't talk anyone and do it with me. Do I want to bring that silly little cart for 3 miles or build a yoke for it and carry that boat on the shoulder? If you come back here in March, you'll see this guy do a flag show. He makes me just schlep canoes across Maine. I don't even know that there's water on that trip. I think it was just a portage. So this was a really nice portage, especially for those of you that remember last year when I portaged through Lowell on the way to the ocean, someone tried to mug me, which I thought was really interesting. Some of you heard. So this is an interesting clock in Pepperell. Anyone seen this clock? Pepperell's like a really cool town center, great little ice cream shop place to eat. This was me riding my bike to the canoe. This is me walking by the canoe. That's a picture there. I wish I had a better picture of this put-in. There's a put-in downstream of that dam, just downstream of the covered bridge. It is nasty. Had I really scouted that better, I scouted it really quick in passing one day. My kids know, like, sometimes like, let's go get ice cream 40 minutes away. And they go, Dad, are we looking at a river? I'm like, yeah, we're gonna go look at a river, right? And I glanced at it, and my kids were in a mood. We had to go. I'm like, yeah, I can put a boat here. It was so steep, so full of rubble, but brush. I couldn't carry the canoe on my head. At times I was carrying it beside me, and Paul's standing right there. He's like, I'll help you. I'm like, don't touch the boat. I'm gonna do this solo. If I had just come back there and spent 30 minutes before the trip with a set of loppers, I could have made that so much. Supposedly, there's another put-in that if you get permission from the power company, you can use it, but I didn't figure that out. So we go into a section now of no pictures, section of the map right here. Why? Because my camera died. In past trips, I realized I didn't take so many pictures, so I bought this beautiful waterproof camera, and it just died. The battery didn't like that. So it took me a while to get that one over down. What I will tell you, has anyone paddled this section? This is stunningly beautiful, and notice how the road's very far away. You paddle that, and you think you're in Maine. It's a really pretty section. It's got a good downward current. Totally worth it. So now we get to our third planned portage up in New Hampshire around a set of rapids. That is accurate. That is what the day looked like. I'm going to be honest. This was the point. We used to talk in the military. Everyone thinks the halfway is the hardest part of any trip, whether it's like a long hike or a deployment. We used to say the 3/4 way is the hardest way. So you've expended a lot of energy, but it doesn't feel like as big a milestone. It's the hard part. So there's like a class 3 rapid here. I wish I could remember. Oh, you can see it. You can see it in the road. It's just over the line. People do run this rapid and play boats with decks on them, and their 8 friends with throw ropes standing there. I've looked at this rapid and think, maybe on a good day, I didn't mind swimming and a bunch of friends here with ropes. There was no chance I was running that. I knew that from a prior scout. There is a way you could almost line this right here, but the way the water was, I would have to be in the water, and I was really worried about taking a slip and going through that rapid outside of it. The only thing worse than going through the rapid you don't want to go through is out of the water, right? So I had a portage, and I'll be honest, this was the point, like, I was just tired, right? And so I started the portage, and I really like to respect private property. This is a home, but I did not want to go through their property. And it was just miserable. I ended up having to make a bunch of trips with different gear, shuttle it to the road, shuttle it back. And so finally I get to this barrier, you can see there's a light, and I go, oh, no problem. I'll just wait for the red light to go across with this canoe in my head and this barrel on my back. And I stood there for 4 light cycles. And just the way it was timed was going to feel like, and you think, we've done this, many of it, like, anyone do a portage through downtown or across a busy road. You're like the, I don't know his drink, Dos Equis, the one I do. You're like the most interesting man. Like, people stop and talk to you and like, whoa, no, what do you feel like? It was commuting hour. No one gave a heck about this guy with this 16-foot boat on his head, a barrel, and this look of this distress on his face. And I just, like, finally just took the thing. I was like, this might be it. And I got across it. And so then you bushwhack down here. Anyone been here? No, this is a really interesting spot. And you get to the last part. Where did that picture go? Oh, that stinks. I had a picture in there, so I don't know how that picture got lost. I apologize. You get down there, and you actually can't get into the water. There's like an old piece of a bridge beam that they must have like taken from a bridge project, and they turn sideways. And you've got to walk across it like a 4 to 8 foot drop with a like rocky rebar that just wants to break your neck, and then put the water in a place that says private property. Yet it's wet. You can't actually own the water in the river. So it's a very interesting put in. Don't want to somehow I missed a slide there. I apologize. You know what? I had to split this into two pieces. I bet I cut that slide out. So now we get down to the fourth and final planned portage, which is a giant dam just south of Lowell. This is, anyone been here? This is a really fascinating place. Producing power, I'll show you a picture here. And then it slices off into a pond, and there's a long canal. And so I was kind of looking at that, and I was like, well, you can see my long walk of 2,853.32 feet. When I was doing math reconnaissance, I was like, well, why would I do that? I'm just going to portage over this and come back to that canal. The trouble is that canal's like 200 feet higher than the river there, right? So when I was glad I did a scouting trip on bicycles, like girls looked at it and decided, oh, heck no. So this is me portaging along that very long portage. I'm getting a little tired, I'm a little sunburned. Put sunscreen on. And then that put in, again, pictures are funny with depth perception. That canoe is probably 8 feet below me, and it's effectively a vertical drop down. And I was just I had already scouted this on the bicycle trip. That was the best place I could find to put that boat back in the water. So at some point, I just shimmied down, stood in waist deep up, and fall back in the boat. There is 0 filters on that. That is what the lighting looked like that day. I was getting nervous that a thunderstorm was coming in. All of a sudden, it looked like that for 15 minutes. Magical, took a picture. Like, wow, that made this worth it, totally worth it. So now we start paddling. We paddle across the big open water. This picture didn't really come out. This is a big flat section south of Nashua. On the left-hand side of the river, you got homes that are easily $1 million homes. On the right-hand section, you have trailers, and they have the same $1 million. So paddling through here, winding down, it's flat, it's windy. You know, and this is that point of the trip. You really realize you're going to do it. All right, good. Get a picture of ducks on a log. I don't have the picture of them when they're doing it. Unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Anyone know what that is? So this is something I actually knew about this. Some animals, mammals, reptiles, mostly animals live in communal nature, but you can see this most in turtles and ducks. When they sleep primarily on a log, because they're linear, and you will notice this. Look at ducks, and you will notice this. Cows do this in herds. The middle animals sleep both eyes closed, both hemispheres of the brain. We know one hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body. The outer animals keep the outer eye open and one hemisphere sleeping. So cows will do that. Go around cow, deer, horses, the ones in the middle sleeping, other ones are up on the edge and they take turns. So I'm a combat vet, about 1,000 days of combat. When I came home, particularly bad deployment, to be honest, I had a lot of PTSD. My now wife tells stories. I literally slept with one eye open. Fire broke. Told me that any noise in the middle of the night, I'd wake up thinking it was harm's way. There's a really good study that thinks that humans don't do this anymore for the most part, except when we go to a new environment. You go on vacation, you go to a hotel, that first night you don't sleep that well because your brain's getting used to all those new noises. It reverts back to one hemisphere sleeping. You don't get as good night rest. So the theory is for a lot of combat vets or anyone who goes through significant trauma, you never go back to two hemispheres sleeping. So you never get good quality sleep. How good is life if you're not getting good quality sleep? It's terrible. So I was like, oh, I've talked to the VA about that. Look at that right there. Interesting. So that's again, no filter. So like I'm like 3 miles south of Nashua. How beautiful is this? So another reason to explore rivers. Rivers can be in these really urban environment. You just start a no filter here, starting to get towards sunset. Remember I talked about, did I give myself enough time? See that in a second. I'm crossing more power lines. This is a very interesting bridge here. That's a pedestrian bridge that I went over my bike scouting. Why that was so big and pre-arched for a pedestrian bridge, I don't know. Because the canal is there, maybe there were wheeling parts of coal over the should dig into that. That's like a mile from my takeout, and I thought, well, that's a perfect takeout close enough to the Merrimack River. Why the heck didn't you use this one? Instead, I paddled another mile. And now it's sunset. You can see lights are coming on. I'm happy, taking a picture of myself. I love old mill buildings. I love thinking about the history of mills. I spend a lot of time looking at little dams and thinking, this is bad. We should free the river of dams. But if this dam has been here for living memory, can we do micro power generation? It's like power, I don't know. I like looking at intakes. And again, I was looking for that red balloon. All I can think about is this. How long do you have the turbine? Is there a rate? That's probably a great way to back there. I'm gonna stay away. So paddling, more mill buildings, getting to the end again, no filters on that. Stunning, stunning building. That's a pedestrian bicycle path across there. And Nashua Manufacturing Company. Those people, they make blankets and coffee and candles. Getting to the takeout, just beautiful. So now I'm thinking, oh, the whole day I was thinking I was behind schedule. I should have started at 3 a.m. Tell me to talk to thank you. And now I'm thinking, no, you're finishing at sunset. It's absolutely perfect. Probably you've ever seen skill. And this is my takeout right here. Just beyond that, you can see a dam where the river kind of supplying it here. About 800 meters past that, half a mile, a little less, is the Merrimack River. When I do a lot of these big trips, I try to be very honest about where I end the trip. I had in my mind the intent when I scouted this to portage around that and actually get myself into Merrimack. There was no good place to get into that without dying, especially trips. So I said, this matches the functionality of what I want to do. And so that's where I ended. That part I did not do. When I do my Concord to Concord trip in the spring, I'll come back and paddle up that just so I can say I've done the water. And that's my stunning takeoff in the middle of Nashua, New Hampshire. That's where I took the boat out. Beautiful mill converted to a condo. Showed that to my wife. And that's my end. Remember, I started at 4 a.m. That's the end of my trip. They even had a nice place reserved for me to park and access all day. So that's it. Thank you for your time and attention. What's next? A couple of goals. So that was like 38-ish miles paddling, 38-ish miles bicycling, and one day all by myself with Paul hanging during certain parts, but not touching the boat. My next big trip is Concord, New Hampshire to Concord, Mass, which is a 67-mile trip, 14 miles of it up the Concord River, not a significant part, but probably has about 4 miles of portage and 3 miles of it all at once. The other thing I'd really like to do is to try to do 100 miles in a day, split between biking and canoeing, supporting myself. But those are some other simple trips. And that's it. Thank you for your time and attention. Anyone got a yoke I can borrow for a note advantage? Concerns? I'll keep those to myself. Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. And thank you again for White Rose for this. Really appreciate it. Making a sense of community. It's a really special thing. If you're foolish enough to consider sitting in a boat for 20 hours going from Concord, the conversation that would be a lot better in tandem. So, which that's a special unique trip because it's 67 miles. Effectively 62 miles of it are flat water. So you want a fast boat, which I have, but like 3 to 4 miles of it are really big class 2, class 3. Those aren't always the same boat. So I'm trying to really figure out how that.
I don't know if you know, but Becky's been listening. You're in trouble.
Oh, my wife? Oh, yeah. I'll see you tomorrow, honey. I haven't bought any boats yet. Cool. Yeah.
Know about the
I did 21 years in the Army and a good chunk of it training at Devon's. I know all too well. And I've paddled that with my kids who are like, oh, look, something shiny in the river. You're like, no, don't touch that shiny piece of exploded ordnance. So I did see some of that. The interesting thing in that chunk of the river, which I paddled a few times, I have seen more hunting rounds because of Bolton Flats, which is a big bird hunting area, than I've seen military. But I'm sure there is a lot. The good news is, once it's in the ground that long, it's not inert, but it tends to be pretty stable as long as you don't touch it, which is always the hard part. They see the thing, they put it in the trunk of the car, drive down to the police station, and say, hey, I found this old grenade. You know, it's an interesting part.
But probably not full.
No, that's a good note to self. The Nashua River is stunningly beautiful, but I will say this, the section of Route 2 has a tremendous amount of trash in it. And my thinking from this, and Al Pierce, who might be on the call, will be at my house for dinner on Saturday, who you might know as the Trash Paddler. You want to go to that website? Go to the Trash Paddler. He's a prolific paddler that loves to go for paddles and pick up trash. That's what he does. He's got this amazing blog on it. He's a family friend. And he and I have talked about this because that river goes to downtown Leominster and Fitchburg, where it's channelized. So whenever there's a big rain event, water runs down the gutters of the street and right into the river. So it's really kind of an eyesore trash-wise. So we're planning a trash pickup trip in the spring. Some of you might be getting an email, but one of the challenges is how do we pick up so much trash? You saw some of the trash in the early photos where you have to do so much darn portaging, right? And then the takeout is not really convenient. So he actually did a scouting trip, and I think he like knocked on someone's door. One of the local farmers is open to us unloading trash on the farmer's field, and then they'll come get it with the tractor. So we're actually having dinner on Saturday to try to figure out how to do that big trash. Interestingly enough, I don't know if anyone's on, when I do these sort of end-to-end trips, I usually like write a check to the Friends of the River Association. Usually I do something cute like $1 per mile or $10 per mile in this case where it's so say, hey, thank you. Do a slideshow for you, talk to you. Like the Friends of the Nashua River, like never call me back. Right? I was like, okay. Well, if you're on the call, give me a call. I'd love to do a slideshow for you or write you a check or talk about how we can get the trash out of that river. We're very happy that someone did that and often have a question about what we saw. Anything else? You want to go through it? Thank you.
All right.
Anything for the callers?
Thank you very much, Oz. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. I'm gonna stop recording now. And we'll check it for audio quality and that kind of stuff, see what we can do, and we'll be posting it up.
Thank you. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Okay, you've got some other presentations that are coming up, right, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Good
Yeah,
point.
we've got third Thursday of February, and we've got another one that's a week early.
In March, week earlier, it's the second Thursday.
March 13th.
Yeah.
That'll be
And
the
that's,
last draw.
and that talk is the Thursday before we close. So last hurrah there. These events, anyone?
Well, pretty much everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything. The shop is hopefully going to be empty.
What day is it?
We are closing,
March 15th.
March 15th. Yeah. The doors closed.
We are
So,
sad
if you're-
to see
if
you
you-
go, but happy you were here.
Yeah, if your
Yeah.
boats are significantly discounted, if you're interested. So,
Yeah.
and we're actually getting down to where of all the different models we have and variations, we're down probably 75% of what we have one. So they're starting to get to that way.
Are you, if you're thinking about a boat, now's the time.
First boat I ever bought for myself.
Yeah.
I love boats.
Okay, and folks online, we're going to stop the meeting now. Thank you very much for attending. And come on by the shop if you have a minute. Take care.